All right, everybody, as you all start to filter in, we're going to give it about 2 minutes before we start. Takes a little bit of time for our attendees to filter in, but thank you for joining us this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you're at, and we'll get started shortly. So just a few moments for people to join. For those of you who are just joining us, I'll have to repeat myself a few times, but we are going to give it about a minute to let folks filter in. It takes a little bit of time for our attendees in the waiting room to join, and then we will go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here with us, and we're going to have a great webinar. So just like I said, just about one more minute and we'll get started. All right, everybody. It is 1 o'clock by my watch, so we're going to go ahead and get started, but folks can still filter in. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. First of all, thank you all for being here with us. My name is Adam Howell. I'm the Outreach Director with New York FarmNet, and we're here today with Jeff Ditzenberger and Chris Peterson, who are the featured subject of a really important and a really impactful documentary that I hope you all got the chance to watch. Just a note, if you did register for the webinar, you've got a link to be able to watch the full documentary. I wish we had all the time in the world and we're able to play it all for you today, but I encourage you, if you haven't seen it, please check it out. It's an amazing set of tales that really show the stresses and the pressures and the impacts of so many things that affect today's farmers. And I've watched it several times and I really love it. We're lucky to have Chris and Jeff here with us today because they are two of the stars of the show. And we're going to have a good conversation. So just a few things before we get started. One thing to note, this webinar will be recorded. So if you didn't catch it, or if you know somebody who wasn't able to catch it, please share the video after we're done. We're going to be sharing it out with a lot of folks. And I think we're going to have a really good conversation today. We are in a setup to where the attendees are muted. So you'll notice that you're not able to use your mic or your video. You also shouldn't be able to use the webinar chat, but we have opened up the Q&A feature for all of you. So if you do have questions, we're hopeful that at the end of the webinar, we'll be able to take a few questions, Chris and Jeff. And also, I believe the director, Sam, is going to be with us as well. He is traveling today, so he's going to be joining us by phone. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about New York FarmNet before we get started, and then we're going to play some clips from the video, from the documentary. We're going to have a few questions for Chris and Jeff, and then, like I said, hopefully we'll wrap up with some questions from the audience. So, for those of you who are not familiar with New York FarmNet, we are a totally free, totally confidential program based out of Cornell University, and we're available to any farmer in New York State. And what we do is we send out confidentially, again, 2 consultants to any farmer. They go to the farm, they meet in person, and they work through any number of problems, any number of questions, any number of opportunities, to be honest. So when we talk about the kind of things that we do, we work on succession planning, we work on business planning, cash flow analysis, beginning farming, any host of issues and questions that farmers might have, and we pair our support services with professional social workers who also help with issues like depression, anxiety, family communication, any types of maybe abuse or things that are happening in the household, substance abuse, divorce, death in the family. All of these issues we have found throughout the years are connected. The emotional, personal side affects the farm business and finances, and farm business and finance affects emotional, personal, and mental health. So we are a holistic program. We are totally free, totally confidential. And we work on these problems as long as is needed for any farmer throughout the state, any size, any commodity. So that's just a few things about New York FarmNet. With me to help in the background on our staff is Melanie Moss. She has put the website, our website, in the chat, so you can check that out as you get a chance. So that's just a little bit about what we are, or who we are and what we do. So to start things off, though, as we get into Greener Pastures, for those of you who haven't had the chance to actually see it, Greener Pastures is a wonderful documentary that really follows a group of people, different farmers throughout the country who have had different experiences and different challenges throughout their lives, and the different approaches they're taking to meet those challenges. The stories are like I said, impactful doesn't even come close to describing it. They are unique, they are varied. We have Chris and Jeff who are featured in the film with us, but there are more folks in the film, and I really encourage anybody who has the opportunity to check it out, because it brings an intimate portrait about the things that are affecting farmers all across the country. This is not a regional thing. This is happening everywhere across the country, and shows you the human side of these impacts. So we're going to play a little clip here to start off. This is a clip that features Chris and some of the work that he has done being an advocate for farmers. So if you will bear with me just one moment, I'm going to share my screen and we will start things off.
Rural America as it is dying. Needs to change.
Take one step this way.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah, and just give them a point so we can see where they're at.
This farm, we moved here in 1978 in December in a blizzard and started with next to nothing. There's nothing like being a family farmer and doing it right.
Excellent. Do you think we left anything on the table, or do you think we covered a decent amount of your story? Is there anything else that you'd like to say, or do you think we did a good job?
Okay. Yeah, I think we're good. We can keep, You're going to be at the event today, right?
Yes, we are, yeah.
I'm going to point you towards our daughter.
Do you know everybody here?
Mostly.
Mostly.
This is a hog confinement. Cages and metal and big money. And no animal welfare there.
Do these animals ever leave these confinements?
No.
They never do?
They can set up or lay in their belly. They don't even have enough room to roll over.
Oh my God.
I have been in this fight a long time with my dad now. Our family goes back at least 3 generations farming. The problem is out here, there are food deserts. There are places when there isn't access to food for 30, 40, 50, 60 miles. The agriculture, the small family farms used to support their communities, and they are just not there anymore.
Not very many people know it, but when I was a little kid, I lost my mother to a suicide. My dad farmed, and we were going into foreclosure, and she took her life. I don't think she could handle life or being off the farm. You know, you get past it, but you never forget. They done it to my family. Big industrial ag, whatever. You know, ruined a life, took a life, ruined a... it makes you into a fighter. And I'll die fighting. That's just who I am.
All right. I hope everybody was able to hear the sound and everything okay. So Chris, a couple questions. You know, the interesting thing about Greener Pastures is that everybody that is featured sort of takes their own approach or has their own reactions to different things that have happened to them personally. I think of advocacy. You know, you were inspired to become an advocate. How did you, or when did you make the jump from you know, the things that had gone on in your life to becoming an advocate for farmers? Where did that transition occur?
Well, I was always wanted to farm. That's the first thing, regardless what's happened, when I was small and whatever. And in the early, got married in 74. Um, didn't have any kids till 1980. And we were trying to get settled in and become a beginning farmer and be able to provide, get a place, their operational expenses, make a living. So we kept putting off having kids because we wanted to provide the right things. And we finally decided, well, now's the time. And right after that, the 80s farm crisis hit, of all things. And we went through some very tough times because we didn't have much of anything then. And that's when I started to realize, hey, wait a minute, this is going back to my dad and my mother and what happened in the early 60s. Here we are again. And so I was somewhat involved, but we had kids and had a farm to run and this and that. And I came to realize something isn't right here. And the 90s come along, freedom of farm and all that. And then the 8-cent hogs hit, where they dropped the market to 8 cents and got rid of 3/4 of the independent family farm producers. And that's when it lit my fire, because I got pissed off after 25 years of work and family work. The wife was part of the operation. We worked the tails off the kids. And I thought, you know what? Enough is enough. I'm going to go out and speak my mind. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And as far as my mother goes, I kind of relate it to, like my dad in the military in World War II in the Pacific. He really never talked much about it. And so I never talked much about my mother, and I really didn't open up. I didn't open up publicly till Sam and Adam came along, and that's how it all happened. And I'm damn proud to stand up for family farm agriculture. I'll go nose to nose with any politician, any president, any corporation, and stand up for the independent, small, and medium-sized family farm. It's the heart of America and the heart of agriculture, regardless of what they say.
Yeah, and you really get that from the film, that you're willing to put yourself out there and talk to anybody. I'm curious, you've been doing this for a long time in some form of, both as a farmer but also as an advocate. You said you started really getting into it in the 90s. Have you seen a change happen? Is the public starting to get it? Or are the politicians and policymakers and leaders starting to understand what's happening out there in the fields and in the barns?
Well, we've made a little progress. Don't get overconfident here. We got a
Right.
long ways to go. One big word out here, hopelessness. There's periods of hopelessness there was throughout our farming life, throughout other family farm lives. It's not a secure situation. You never ever know where you're at, as far as markets go, as far as weather goes, as far as politicians go. They make empty promises. And another thing out here, I want to emphasize, the I belong to the Democratic Party. I pick on them. I talk to the Republicans. But that the Democratic Party, and the Republicans too, the percentage of voters in rural areas. Well, after 30 years and nothing's happened, and the politicians come out here and try and sell their goods, nothing happens. It's a sense of hopelessness. So why go vote? We got to get past that, and it needs to start at the local level, the state level, instead of talking about other issues, marriage and guns and everything else. Let's talk about real people trying to make a living, which includes independent family farms too, the economics of the thing. That will get people's attention and unify people instead of divide people over all these issues. So yeah, there's some progress, but misinformation, between organics and sustainable and everything else, people are learning. Let's just put it that way.
Sure. I think it's a great point. No one can ever be too overconfident about, changes that take a long time to make. And it is important to note that, a lot of people probably feel a sense of hopelessness about change. But that leads me into another question. Do you think that more farmers, um, especially ones who have gone through a lot of personal struggle, do you think more farmers would be well served by telling their stories? Getting out there and talking about how things have impacted them. I know that it's difficult, but in your experience, does that help to come from the horse's mouth, so to speak?
I didn't catch about 3/4 way through what you said.
Sure. I'm just wondering if you think that it is a good thing. It is better for more farmers to talk about their own experiences to the public, to politicians, to anyone.
Things got to get pretty bad and things got to get pretty desperate before a farmer will open up,
Sure.
even to his wife. Okay.
Yeah.
And so we're facing that, and it's more so in this occupation than any other I've seen. It's because of the nature of the occupation. You're a loner. You do your own thing. You go out, take care of your crops, take care of your livestock. The wife might be part of it, but it's not like going to work in an office or a factory around a bunch of people. So it's amplified the loneliness out here and the do-it-yourself thing. And I've always a lot of negative things going on, and that's part of who I am. You mentioned that. I'm always positive, and most farmers are, in a sense, positive because they always think things will get better. And when the big hammer falls and they realize it ain't, well, that's when the suicides come along and the mental health issues and everything else.
Well, that makes sense. I can't remember who said it, but I think there's a quote out there that said farming is a profession of hope. So you said it really really well.
Let me say one more thing
Please.
about the family farm. It's a standalone occupation, and by that I mean it's our home, it's our workplace, it's our everything. Okay, our whole life, home, occupation, farm, everything is one thing. And you start ripping one thing away from the other, again, that gets back to the mental health and the suicide.
Sure. Absolutely. Well put. All right, Jeff, we're gonna play a little clip from your section of the documentary, and then I'm gonna round up with some questions for you. So everybody just bear with me as I get Jeff's segment going here.
Am I very far now? Am I very far now? Am I very far? Am I very far? Am I very far now? Am I very Here I go again on my own, going down the only road I'm living on. Like a drifter, I was born to walk alone. One of my favorite people in the whole wide world.
Dude,
How are you?
how are ya? How much rain?
Oh, 2 tenths.
Yeah, just
Enough to slow us down.
Just enough. Just
Settle the
enough.
dust.
All right. You know, just because it's not winter does not mean that our farm families aren't stressed, aren't a little depressed, aren't questioning their future. Jeff Ditzenberger in studio with us. He's the founder and president of TUGS. What's your gauge on things?
There's so much uncertainty, not only on crop prices, not only on cattle prices, not only on milk prices, but also the uncertainty for those folks that have done this their entire life. And now they're like, what if I have to get out? What if there's no choice for me but to do something else? And some of these folks are in their, late 40s, early 50s that have never worked off of the farm.
Right, and that is really the message that we want to share with you today is you're not alone. A lot of people are feeling the way that you are. Jeff and I talk to them often.
When I started my nonprofit foundation back in 2013, I'd get a couple calls a month. And my board and myself are averaging a couple calls a day on average now. I guess one of the things I do want to say to the folks out there right now is keep that faith. Keep that faith that what you're doing is to the best of your ability. We can't control the climate, we can't control the prices, but we can control our attitudes. I take a huge sense of pride in the fact that what I do feeds a hungry nation. Get to spend some time with nature. Nature can be kind of growly sometimes, but then again, so am I.
Easterly winds 5 to 10 miles. Chance for scattered rain showers tonight. Lows level off around 50. Overcast skies. Overcast skies again. Tomorrow, scattered thunderstorms likely. Highs cloudy. Q102.
It takes a lot of faith to sit out here all day, My ex-wife is my neighbor, literally across the fence. She misses me. I know this. You know how I know she misses me? Because she remarried a guy named Jeff. True story. She even asked me to help plan her wedding because I officiate and I have a little business. I do some wedding planning and stuff. I plan 3 on my own. I'm obviously an expert. But that young lady at the age of 23 had to take her husband off of life support. They had an argument about money and him buying his mom and dad's cows, and he put a gun to his head and he pulled the trigger in front of her at 23 years old. So what do we need to do to change this? And then it dawned on me, I'm gonna have a nonprofit and it's gonna be called TUGS. Talking, understanding, growing, and supporting.
Did 2 outdoor weddings.
Yeah,
And one barn one.
I've done like 60.
Yeah.
I love
Hey,
doing
but
them.
anyway, you willing to put down your phone number? I know that Tammy catches you once in a while on Facebook. We got a card. But who's not saying that we're gonna have to maybe give you a call at some point to get up to our area and help a few people out because it's that serious.
Yeah.
And I keep telling, I said we can't be ashamed of what's happening because we're not causing it, you know.
But I stayed out and harvested beans until 11 o'clock the other night, so I only got 10 acres left.
When do you think you'll be able to get that done?
When it dries out again. You know, that's like what, you know, somebody said, well, like, how much does that seed really cost you? And I'm like, well, we bought enough seed for 1,000 acres, and that was $101,000. And that's with no crop in the ground, no guarantee it's going to grow or anything. So, you know, you better damn well hope you got a good year.
It turns out today's snow and rain is going to push us higher up the list on the wettest years in Wisconsin ever. Meteorologist Chris Reese joins us now.
I mean, everybody's fighting this today. I talked to everybody. Everybody's fighting it. This was just a weird freak deal. I mean, how often do we get a snow in November that's, you know, I mean, it started to drizzle yesterday and now it's negative 13 with the wind this morning already. So anyways, yeah, well, and I got a new grandbaby that I haven't seen yet that I'm kind of getting a little bit irritated about. I mean, it's just, you know, it's just kind of everything. I don't know. I'm kind of glad that you just let me vent to you this morning. I'm glad you called me. So. Uh-oh, Sam's put on weight. He's using a different hole this year. God, I hope you're right on that, Judy, because 2019 kind of sucked. That's fine. It's not a big deal. Santa will still come to your house.
Come here. Just, no, hey, no, you don't have to. Nope, I'm coming over to you. You don't have to.
I'm watching freaking hundreds of dollars of freaking corn get left out here. I'm really not in a festive mood. Probably closer to thousands of dollars of corn. Good thing you don't have me mic'd up right now.
Everybody look up here. Hands down. Say cookies.
Good job.
Boy.
Santa?
How are you? Santa's seen your Snapchats. Just write it to me and send it up to the North Pole, and I'll make sure that you get that, okay? Awesome. High five. All right. Have a good parade. Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas, Monroe! Ho, ho, ho! Ho, ho! Batman hat. That's pretty cool. Merry Christmas!
All right. Jeff, I love it. You kick off the film. You really show what it's like to live not just as a farmer, but in rural areas, and obviously you wear a lot of hats, including a Santa hat. I think it's great. We talked about before this. You're not the first person I've seen on a combine in a Santa outfit, and the point is, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, it seems like for you, and I would probably extend this to a lot of people, that having hobbies, being active in the community, being a part of a social group around you is something that is important, both in terms of combating maybe some of the isolation farmers feel, some of the things that can really impact mental health. What are your thoughts on that, just in your experience?
Well, it's a couple of things. I like being busy, and I can remember, though, not too long ago, talking to my therapist, and she goes, you know why you like being busy, right? And I'm like, yeah, because I like doing things. I like my hands to be active. My mother says idle hands are the devil's playground. and whatnot. And she goes, it's actually a coping mechanism so that you don't have to deal with some of the stuff that's going on in your head. And it hit kind of hard, but in both a good and a bad way. And, you know, for those of you that are listening out there, you know, find things that bring you peace, find things that bring you hope. I have a few of my friends that, this will be my 19th season as Santa for our town. I've actually been dubbed the official Santa. They haven't given me the key to the city or a plaque or anything like that yet, so I don't know what exactly that means. But the part for me is, and those friends will say to me, they're like, dude, you're taking this a little too serious. But it's the part that brings me that moment. It's just like being on stage with all the stuff that I do for theater. It gives me that time that I can put my things aside, see the joy in other people, see the happiness that it brings other people, and feed off of that myself. I mean, you don't get nutrition by not eating. You get nutrition by putting things into your body that are good for you. And honestly, for my mental health and my mental health journey, that's what's worked for me. I believe it or not, one of my mental diagnoses is that I have severe anxiety of being in front of people or speaking in front of people. And, you know, my little Hayden, when I gave a speech at the University of Iowa, she was like, you look like you're going to throw up. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, you've been doing this for years. And I'm like, doesn't matter. You know, it also gives those of us that struggle with that kind of stuff. And I'm sure Chris will attest to this as well, too. For those of us out here, anyone, not just me, not just Chris, the general population, when you can find something that you can conquer, that sense of satisfaction on that is better than anything else that you can have out there. You know, I talk about how I failed at my suicide attempt, and a lot of my friends will say, no, you succeeded at life. So I think that's one of the things that we need to bring back to those rural communities. Our theater guild has been in existence for 54 years. That's kind of unheard of. We're one of the longest running ones around. You know, find something. We've got to let farmers know too, and agriculturists, that they can step off the farm for a couple of days and it's not gonna go in the tank. When I was married to my ex-wife, who was the dairy farmer, I never took vacations. I even qualified for a trip to Ireland with John Deere when I worked for them, and she wasn't gonna go. She's like, take a friend or something. You know, we've got to, and you know, I listened to Chris, and I love Chris to death. Him and his wife, I got to meet them in person. Two of the sweetest people I've ever met. There is more to life than farming, though. There is more to it than just milking the cows or doing the crops. You do enough things that are gratification to help feed everybody else, but you got to feed yourself too.
Sure. So to sort of follow on that in terms of you know, having a goal and having something to build towards, I'd love to learn more about TUGS. You know, a little bit more about its beginnings. You know, maybe you can talk about where you hope to see it go, what you've been up to recently with regards to the nonprofit. I think it's an amazing organization. Please, what can you tell us about it that we haven't heard from the documentary?
So, TUGS, oh man, what a journey. So I'm a military Navy guy, and I had wrote a blog for Farm Bureau talking about men and mental health and farmers and mental health, and you know, obviously I'm both of those, and I'm also a veteran as well, where there's that whole, for lack of a better term, disconnect, where, you know, we can't talk about our stuff. You know, military, you know, supposed to keep all that stuff bottled up and whatnot. Ended up writing a blog for WFBF, went absolutely viral. Got asked to speak at Madison-Dane County Safe Communities Guys Night Out. Threw my speech away on the way up there because I was like, it's just not flowing. This is not who I am. And then they talked about, really briefly introduced me and talked about my Navy career. And that's when it struck me. So the ship that I was on was a very large ship, about the size of Camp Randall Stadium in Wisconsin, where I'm from, just to give you an idea. So a football field, 400 people on there. My hometown had like 410. And we, in order to get back into port safely, or if we broke down in the middle of the ocean, which, believe it or not, does happen, we'd have to call a tugboat to bring us back in. And what's interesting, what I found was kind of cool and interesting about it, is that when we were coming back into port, they'd shut everything down, and we would always joke about how those of us down below could hear the fish eating the barnacles off the side of the ship. And, you know, you'd feel this little bump, and then you'd magically move, and then you feel another little bump, and then this magical voice would come across the box. It's basically said, hey, we're back in port. Those of you that don't have to work, go see your family. The rest of you, chow's at 6. And it was unbelievable, that sense of calm. You didn't see that outside force, but you knew it was there. And so on the way home, then I said, why can't life be like this? Like, why can't you, if you're weathering a terrible storm, or if you need to get into a safe place, or if you're broke down in the middle of the ocean, why can't you call a tugboat? So I said to my buddy Scott, who's my best friend, who happened to go with me that night, I said on the way home, I'm like, dude, I want to start a nonprofit. And he's like, dude, you already farmed. Do you need another one? And I said, well, maybe less government regulation. And he's also a lie. And anyways, I stayed awake until 2 o'clock that night, came up with the name, came up with the acronym. Scott and I agreed on it. I did all the paperwork, got it, the articles of incorporation, all that kind of stuff. And the main premise behind TUGS is to get people linked up with other people who will be transparent with them, who will be unbiased, who will tell them what they need to hear, and in a way that it's that you can take that in. And to give you an example on that, Scott obviously is one of my TUGS. I sent him a text one day, and I'm like, I hate my lunch. And he calls me up, and he's like, what's wrong with your lunch? And I said, it's leftovers again. And he goes, you love leftovers. And I'm like, not 2 days in a row, I don't. And he goes, well, who makes your lunch? And I go, my wife does. And he goes, make your own damn lunch. And in the back of my mind, when I said my wife made it, I wanted him to say, well, she should do a better job, when in fact I did need to hear that I needed to take accountability for my own lunch, et cetera, et cetera. Flip that up a few years ago when the guy that I farmed with, Rich, got his first bout with brain cancer, and they didn't know if he was even going to make it to the hospital. And I called Scott, and I'm on the other end sobbing, can't get any words out, can barely catch my breath. And all I heard on the other end of that phone line was, I'm here, brother. When you're ready to talk, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. That's what we want to try to do. And my biggest portion of it is to get rid of the stigmas behind it. Like with my suicide attempt, you know, a lot of people think that suicides are a split-second decision. I planned mine for 6 weeks. I even wrote a note, and I hate writing notes on anything, much less a 3-pager. You know, the COVID was contagious. Bipolarism is not. You know, there's so many things out there that there's so many misconceptions. And the other goal that I have personally is to try to bridge that conversation gap that we have between rural America and non-rural America, the gap between even psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, and farmers. Farmers speak their own language. You know, veterans speak their own language. EMTs and firefighters and those type of people speak their own language. There's this whole big gap that we're missing that we need to bring back in, and that's kind of where I want to see TUGS go. You and I talked just before we started. I'm going to be speaking to the Farm Credit group here in January at their annual conference. I do QPR training, which is like CPR for mental health. But I would like to see like little TUGS organizations in all of our communities. I don't care what people call it. They can call it whatever they want. They don't need to take, I don't want membership fees or any of that kind of stuff, but just to create conversation. You know, I'm all about, that's my theme this year is, you know, have the difficult conversation. And that difficult conversation is asking someone if they're suicidal, asking someone if they're fighting depression, asking someone if they're feeling like they want to end their life, as opposed to the difficult conversation of being at their funeral when nobody reached out to them and they've died by suicide.
You know, and that leads into another question I have, because you bring up a good point, especially whenever mental health services, you know, there are deserts for these things around the country, especially in rural areas. People are isolated. It's not always easy to access professional services. Do you find that community-based approach, you know, nonprofits, whether you call it TUGS and what you have going on around you, or other organizations in other places, that's a really good solution, or at least one of many potential solutions to address the problem throughout rural America, especially in farming communities where there may not be these services available, a community upswelling of support?
Absolutely. I mean, Chris can probably remember just as well when, you know, a farmer would get hurt, or if, you know, his wife just had a new baby and there was cows to milk or hogs to feed or whatever, and all the neighbors came over and helped out. Nobody had to ask or do any of that kind of stuff. You know, me personally, I had a struggle trying to, first of all, I had a struggle trying to get into a psychiatrist, and that was back in the 90s, and it's even worse now to get into a psychiatrist or a therapist with the wait lists and stuff. I'm a qualified peer specialist, and the only way you can become a peer specialist is to have lived in experience. And for me personally, as a farmer, as a man, as a veteran, I would rather talk to someone who's actually experienced the stuff that I've experienced than to talk to someone who, not that, and don't get me wrong, I love my therapist, one of the most amazing people I've ever met in my lifetime. She's book smart, but doesn't always understand where my language is coming from when I talked about bushels per acre or you know,
Right.
100 weight of milk and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, peer support, in my opinion, is one of the best things we can have out there. When you see 2 5-year-olds on the playground and one of them can't figure out the swing and the other one knows how to do it, they're more likely to have someone at their level, at their understanding and stuff, help them out as opposed to anything else. People are the same way. Like, I would rather talk to someone who's going to just sit and listen to me and be a sponge. And, you know, at the end, and I usually, like, what I try to do myself personally, when someone wants to talk to me, I'll be like, okay, so what do you hope to accomplish out of this after you talk to me? Do you want me to give you advice? Do you want me to just shut up and listen? Do you want me to what? Nope, I just want you to listen. Or, you know, let me tell you what I got to tell you, and then I'll go from there, or whatever the case may be. We're going to put them on the same type of playing field that we would like to be put on. And I think that's what's going to improve a lot of the mental wellness that we're trying to strive for, and get rid of a lot of the stigmas and everything out in rural America. And honestly, you know, people say, you know, how many people do you talk to in a month? And I would say on average, it's probably close to 90 on average. But not everybody's in a crisis situation either. Like, sometimes we just need to go to the next cubicle at our job and ask Bill how he's doing, or to say something nice to somebody at the grocery store, or to, you know, find someone on Facebook in our social media group that is like, man, I'm just tired of everything, and go into their messenger box and say, hey, what's going on? You know, is everything okay? Something you want to talk about? Sometimes it's something minor, sometimes it's something major, but, you know, I feel like we've got that disconnect now because, oh my God, we can just text stuff. Man, you got to hear somebody's voice. You've got to reach out to those people. You've got to have those conversations.
Absolutely. You know, kindness is contagious. It's a great message, and I think that more people, especially this time of this season, this election season, this hyper you know, active season of angst is a good time to reach out to somebody. I think in any place in the world, farming, you know, your profession, what of choice, whatever it be. I do want to. I see the director of Greener Pastures, Sam, is joining us by phone. Sam, can you hear us? Wanted to see if we could ask you a few questions because I'm very interested in learning about, first of all, sort of what prompted you to make the film. Hey, Sam, can you hear me? Okay. Uh-oh, looks like it's coming through a little bit choppy. Just give me 1 second here. How about now? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hear me? How's that sound? Test.
There we go. That sounds really good. All right. Well,
Okay,
first
good.
of all, yeah, I would love to learn a little bit about you know, just the genesis of Greener Pastures. Like, what prompted you to make the film? Because it's such an amazing journey, getting to know all the people in it. I would love to know what started you off.
Yeah, the genesis of the project really derived from honestly a series of statistics shared by the CDC, sharing that agriculture and farm workers had the highest rate of suicide among any profession in the United States. And then NPR ran a story on that. That happened in the spring of 2018. And so from there, it was kind of just like a situation of just trying to figure out how to cast a net on such a widely spread issue, and how I could like tangibly do that as a 24-year-old, not having any money, not knowing really anything about this space. And then so I just did some research and probably spoke to 100 farmers over a 6-month period. And after speaking to everyone, I kind of made a decision about wanting to focus the film on farmers, and they had to have some kind of direct or indirect correlation to suicide, whether it was suicide attempt, suicide ideation, or a family member had died by suicide. So the genesis was always about mental health, and then all of the other kind of tougher issues like policy, weather, trade, tariffs kind of just naturally came about.
Well, you met some amazing people. You collected some amazing stories in the film. I'm curious, you know, from my understanding in making in producing projects like this, there's always some surprises along the way. Is there anything when making the film and getting to know the people featured in it that surprised you?
Yeah, I would say the biggest surprise was like Becky, Chris's daughter, becoming such a profound character and
Yes.
very emblematic of like what it's like to pass the torch of this generational shift. Because I think that's the biggest challenge when you look at the median age for farmers and agriculture workers across the country. It needs to get, you know, younger because these generations are phasing out, and when we lose our family farms, that's when, you know, it just you lose that charm, you lose that touch, that quality. So I think Becky becoming a pivotal character was something I never anticipated for. Like that didn't happen until about a year and a half into the shoot. So the film shoot was about 5 years. And so Becky would always come around and I'd see her and I had conversations. But I was like, you know, we can really mobilize around her. And, you know, she ran for office and she did something that, you know, Chris talks about in the film that he never once did. I think that was a really beautiful moment.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, and it's something I was hoping to get to during the webinar today. Is another great reason to watch this film is it's really heartening to see, you know, another generation, like you said, take up the torch. It's something that's going to be so necessary in the future for people, you know, not only in terms of continuing farming, but in terms of continuing advocating for farmers. And that's an incredible point. You know, the film has been out for a little while now. I'm curious, what has the response been? Has there been any thoughts of, well, I guess it's a two-part question. What has the response been, and do you have any thoughts of a follow-up or any related projects in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. The response has been generally positive. You know, Jeff and Chris can talk about their experiences and some of the events they've been to and the screenings they've spoken to thus far. You know, we've had really favorable reception. Everyone seems to really enjoy the film. I think the only time we didn't have, like the one time we got some negative pushback was like Jeff can speak to. I think there was something about like the animal activists or things like that, which I didn't necessarily agree with because you know, these farmers are you know, they treat the animals like their family. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But other than that, the reception's been incredibly positive. We've played it, you know, over 50 film festivals internationally and domestically. We've won probably about 15 plus awards. You know, we had our national television broadcast on PBS, an independent lens. So we had an audience of about 2 million people that tuned in to watch it. And it'll be available for purchase and stream and rent through Amazon, Apple TV, Google, and YouTube, and all major streamers later this fall.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's amazing. And the lucky folks on the webinar here got to see it in total as a part of the registration. So that's really cool. I didn't know that the public release was coming up that soon.
It'll probably be like probably like in like 2 months.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. So we've done really good here in terms of time. I was really hoping to see if there were any of our attendees in the audience who wanted to put some questions in the Q&A. We do have a little bit of an opportunity to see if there are folks who want to ask some questions of our panelists. While people consider whether they want to do that, I do have sort of an interesting question that any one of you can answer, or all of you can in turn. But you know, there are a lot of issues in play that are interconnected. There are financial issues, there are market issues, there are mental health access, awareness, all these things. So there's so much that needs to be done. But if any of you could pick one thing that you could change if you had the power to right away, what would it be? And again, that's a tough question because, you know, there's so many things that any one of us could want to see improved in terms of advocating for farmers, supporting farmers, seeing the farming community have better access to things like mental health. But I'm curious if there's one thing in your unique perspectives that you would like to see changed, what would it be?
I think all the fluff that's in the farm bill needs to come out and needs to be
All right.
transferred to where the farmers have more access. I worked very closely with Senator Tammy Baldwin to get vouchers available through the Wisconsin Farm Center. And there's other places that do the same thing. But here we are, not too far away from the November election. Still don't have a farm bill. I travel 7 states for work. The angst that is putting into not only our agricultural farming sector, but the forestry sector, which I consider agriculture, even though they have their own little snippet inside the farm bill. I mean, the access is great, but if you don't have the ability to pay for it, which, it doesn't seem like any of the insurance that farmers can get their hands on through whatever programs they're working with has anything for it. That's been a sore spot in my side for the past couple of years. And for those that don't know, the farm bill is mostly food stamps, WIC, and other programs like that, which are great. I had to use them when my son was born. Totally agree with them, but there's a bunch of other garbage in there that doesn't need to be, but they neatly wrap it under the farm bill. Let's get some of that garbage out of there, get it back to the farmers who need it, and let them use it for mental health programs or to see a therapist or whatever.
So I'm gonna break in and preempt my own question here, because we did get a really good question in the Q&A that I wanted to ask you all. And Chris, this specifically I think would be a good one for you, since we just talked about the generational changes and the generational passing the torch. The average age, James asked this, the average age of farmers in the U.S. is now around 58 years old. What do you all think, Chris? I'm going to put this to you first. What do you think agriculture is going to look like in 10 or 15 years?
Well, I'll talk about that. Direction of the politicians and the elected officials is going to determine a lot of that.
Right.
A lot of what's going on is out of Jeff and me and every family farmer's control out here. That's the first point I want to make. Our biggest friend and ally could and should be the consumer, as far as safe food, sustainable food, and the way it's produced, the way it's raised, everything else. Like my daughter Becky says, that's going to define a lot of the future, as far as us sticking around and redefining and re-emphasizing family farm agriculture. Sometimes you need to go back to move ahead. And by that, I mean 40 years ago, rural America, including my area, the school buses were full in 20 minutes, half an hour. Now they drive for 100 miles before they even get a half a bus load. Like I said in the movie, rural America is dying, and we see it all the time. There's no young farmers out here, very, very few, and those guys, they got a hold of the old money, the generational money, and are able to continue to farm, and it ain't like it used to be. Well, a kid grows up poor on a family farm, says, I want to farm, and he goes out and buys the equipment and everything else, and some of them fall off by the wayside. A lot of them made it. And I want to see us move ahead by going back to something like that. The infrastructure was built for and around family farm agriculture, the sale barns, the elevators, the main streets, which kept people here, which employed people. We got to figure out a way to revitalize rural to survive as rural, as a society, and as a nation, I believe.
That's a great point. I'm going to move on to another question. Sierra just put something in the Q&A. As someone working with farmers, FSA, she mentions, what do you think is something important we can do to share this message of or be a support source for farmers? You know, so your everyday person or somebody that maybe works with farmers directly but is not a farmer, what can they do to be supportive and share the message?
I think one of the things that are, and I love our local FSA office. Actually, most of the FSA people I've ever worked with have been phenomenal. The first thing that I think every FSA office ought to be doing is teaching their people some sort of mental health first aid, whether it is mental health first aid, QPR like I do, whatever the case may be, because one, it gives you another tool in your toolbox and gives you that strength, I guess, for lack of a better term, to be able to ask people if they're in a crisis situation, or if they're having a bad day or whatever the case may be. With that being said, though, here's the other caveat challenge with that. And to the gal that messaged or that has this question, thank you so much, because this is something that I've been kind of trying to wrap my head around too. When we're doing this, when we're out there as FSA officers or as feed salespeople or as Cornell University employees or whatever the case may be, remember that we're out there as human beings, and we also need to, when we're taking in all this stuff as the sponge, we need to find out who we can unleash on or unload on as well too. So it's, you know, and that's where kind of with Chris's comment about the community, you know, if we can get back to some of those basic ideologies of just talking to people, of having conversations. I use it a lot at the colleges when I give my presentations. If you send somebody a text message and you say, "Hey, Adam, how are you doing?" and Adam sends me back, "Okay," that could be okay or okay or okay. Whereas when you actually pick up the phone, I don't know if a lot of you know this, but you can actually dial a number on there and call someone and you can hear the voice on the other end. You know, so FSA people, you are out there, bankers, those types, you guys are out in the trenches all the time. Take a little bit of empathy with you, get qualified as a QPR instructor so that you can ask the question. You can persuade that person that, hey, this isn't the end of the world. We'll get your banker out here. We'll work with you. I think the Cornell model right now of having, you know, a therapist or a social worker, you know, this is why peer specialists are becoming very, very popular right now, because we speak the language. You know, go out there with another person. If you think Farmer Bill is struggling, talk to your supervisor or talk to one of your coworkers and say, hey, can we go out on this together? You know, I've just got some uncomfortability or whatever, and you can observe from all sides. However, if you're going to ask someone how they're doing and they don't say okay, be prepared to have that conversation.
Chris, I'm going to put this next question to you. This looks like it might be our last one. What advice, if you're comfortable with answering this, what advice would you have for families that are survivors of a family member that died by suicide to help them better cope with it emotionally?
Oh boy. Yeah, you got to get, I guess I'll refer to me personally, and Jeff probably just say the same thing as far as his circumstances. You got to get past the quiet time. In other words, the morning time. And there comes a time you got to pick yourself up. And sometimes it's little by little. Sometimes it takes a long time. And, you know, I believe the reason my mother took her life, and this references mental health today and suicides. And let me say, our daughter reminds me so much of my mother. It makes me cry at times. My mother was full-blooded Irish. She had a huge organic gardening, canning, freezing, everything else. She couldn't keep her hands out of the dirt. Okay. And when my dad got the foreclosure letter and seeing all that come to an end, that was the thing that pushed her over the edge, I believe. She couldn't visualize a life somewhere else or doing something else. And that's the way a lot of the suicides are. There comes a tripping point. And so me personally, it took a lot of years to figure it all out and put it all together in my mind. And, we went through a farm bankruptcy in 2000 after the HOGs just couldn't pay the bills, period. And I thought a lot about my mother and what my dad went through and this and that. And like I said earlier, that's the point where it lit my fire. And by that, I mean thinking about what they done to my dad and what happened to my mother and our family and in rural America in general and other farmers. I come to the point where, like I said, enough is enough. I come to the point where, by God, I'm going to go out and fight and raise hell. And that's where I've been ever since. You got, and I've had people tell me, a number of times, oh, you found your niche. You found your new occupation. And Jeff has too. By going out and caring for people and standing up for people, fighting the good fight for the common good. And it's endless, and it's so satisfying to help people and to make people understand what we're going through and have gone through. I'll be quiet there. I could talk for hours on this.
This is one of those things that I wish we had hours and hours on. Yeah.
Can I add one thing to that though?
Yeah, please go ahead, Jeff.
Because that's a common question. Chris has been asked it a million times. Sam has been asked it a million times. I've been asked it a million times. Anybody that does this kind of work has been asked it a million times. There is nothing wrong that you can say to someone who has lost someone by suicide. If they blame themselves, remind them that it wasn't their fault. Remind them that, that's the biggest, I think that's one of the hardest things that anybody that's been through it, even some of my friends later on after they found out, that I had actually tried to die by suicide the night that I got arrested and charged with a felony, they're like, dude, I'm sorry I didn't say anything. Like, just be present for people. And those ones that are really struggling with it, just check in on them. Just be like, hey, how's it going today? How's it going today? Being present is the best present you can give to someone after they've lost someone by suicide. Again, I mean, obviously there, you could say something really off the wall, like, well, he's in a better place. Not probably the thing to say, but I will tell you, the people that I have talked to over the years, one of the biggest things they say is, I'm just glad that you talked to me. And that's all you have to do. You don't have to have the right words. You don't have to have the right tone. You just need to have a little empathy and a little kindness.
And let me add something else very quickly.
Okay.
This issue is not talked about, enough. And just in the last year, in a 10-mile radius of where we live, not all to do with agriculture, but we've had 3 suicides, all anywhere from a 15-year-old to middle-aged people. 3 of them in the last year. Suicides, not mental, it's mental health, but it went over the edge. Suicides, 3 of them.
Well, I don't think that there is a point that is more important to end things on than what you both just conveyed, as far as the seriousness of the issue and some things that can be done, at least from your own perspectives on how to address it. But we're at a little bit past 2. I just want to say thank you all, Jeff, Chris, Sam. It's been amazing to talk with you. I hope that everybody here and far beyond gets a chance to see the whole documentary. It's really amazing, and I hope we can stay in touch. I hope we learn more and are able to keep the conversation going. So thank you all. Thank you all for our attendees for joining us. This will be posted, like I said, within a day or so. Hopefully, we'll get it up on our YouTube channel. And thank you for being here. So with that, I will say say farewell. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Adam.
Adam.